Welcome to tonight's edition of the Mindful Runner live streams.
We're going to unpack the fueling strategies that won UTMB. Tom Evans and Ruth Croft, they both have the same nutrition coach, Paul Booth, and we're going to share their actual numbers and translate them into what you can do in your own training and racing.
And we'll compare those with Tour de France fueling, plus some practical lessons for training the gut, saving yourself some money, and adapting to heat and cold. So what's the big idea that we've come away with from the way that Ruth and Tom approached this? It is fuel for the segment you're on. We're not fueling by the hour.
That's right. So it's terrain timed. So Tom packed by course segments, not time, as Fred says, which means that he fueled before climbs. He adjusted his intake before technical sections, and he stayed flexible. And that is the main takeaway that we want you to remember.
So let's take a look at his actual numbers. Tom averaged between 85 and 90 grams an hour. That was his average. But he ranged from 80 to 110 grams.
So he used liquids only at night when he was above 2,000 meters, when it was too cold for gels, and he took caffeine in measured doses. So about 200 milligram hit earlier on, he had smaller top-ups, and then he had that final push later on.
And this is a visual of terrain-timed fueling strategy. If you take a look, we've got 80 grams of carbs on the flats, 110 grams of carbs on the climbs. And it's an illustration of what we're talking about with this strategy-based fueling.
So he basically knew carbs burned, what his carbs burn was at each heart rate zone. And he pre-packed his vest pockets by course segments. That led him to front load 120 to 160 grams before big climbs. And that's not guessing, that's precision planning.
Yep. So in his planning, as Deb says, he was lab tested to determine exactly what he was burning at which heart rates. And that meant he packed into his vest pockets the appropriate amount of carbs for the heart rate he was about to experience over the next segment.
Okay, on to Ruth Croft.
So let's take a look at what Ruth Croft looks like in terms of her race prep.
So Ruth increased her fueling ceiling year on year. She moved from 80 grams an hour in 2024 to 100, 110 grams an hour in 2025 by simply training her gut to take on more.
So she could take 3 gels in at once. There was a point in the race about 50 or 12, 15 Ks before the end where Ruth was able to, and we all saw it on TV, smash down 3 gels in a row, around about 75 grams of carbs in that last little moment. She was already 160 kilometers into an event. And that just comes from practice.
She had no issues.
So why do these numbers matter?
So these numbers are world-class, but individualized. So Tom relied on exceptional fat oxidation and precision timing. Ruth pushed higher carbs with trained gut tolerance.
So the lesson isn't that you have to get in 120 grams of carbs an hour. The lesson is to find your own ceiling and then train for that. So what about the 120 grams of carbs? And you hear this as being the new standard, right? 120 grams of carbs, everybody should be trying for that. Well, Paul Booth, who is the nutritionist for these two, has basically come out and said, it's impossible. There's no evidence that shows that more than 100 grams is effective. And in fact, the further you go over 100 grams, the more likely you are to have gut issues.
So some can and some can't. More isn't automatically better. You need to train it. You need to test it. Don't just copy what everybody else is doing.
And a lot of the research that we use as ultra runners is initially worked out during the Tour de France, the ultimate endurance event. But the thing is, on the bike, it's a whole lot easier because you're not bouncing and you're also able to access your fuel very easily. So you don't have any restrictions. But they're fueling at about 90 to 120 grams an hour at any point. And there will be exceptions where they go up as much as 160 grams during specific sections of the course.
So runners can target similar totals, but must adjust the format. So gels, chews, and fluids depending on the terrain and if your hands are still working at that time.
Yeah, and that brings us to heat versus cold fueling, because they also differ.
So heat obviously stresses the gut. So go lighter, more liquid, and separate electrolytes when possible.
And cold reduces your dexterity. So Tom had a rule at night above 2,000 meters, it's liquids only. That's a simple, practical adaptation. And then the big question of electrolytes, which often comes up when it comes to racing.
Okay, so Tom's sodium needs were actually quite low. He covered them with standard sports drinks. Oversalting can make gut issues even worse.
And hydration must be treated separately to fueling. Don't mix them up. We'll be covering hydration in the next episode of our live streams. So what we see in a number of other UTMB case studies, and Precision Hydration put out 4 or 5 case studies of their elite runners, what we saw across the board.
So most were still in that 60 to 90 gram an hour range, with over 70% from gels and carb drinks.
And that proves the pattern. High carb bias, gel-led fueling with solids as a minority for variety. Yep. So this is typical of a gut training ladder. Gut training is like leg training. You build progressively.
So if you have a 3 to 6 months program, weeks 1 to 3, try and get in about 60 grams an hour as a baseline. Then moving into weeks 4 and 6, try and increase it, 75 grams an hour, and bolus practice. Week 7 to 8, 90 grams an hour steady, and then your peak phase, 100 to 110 grams an hour, rehearsed in race conditions. So that long run.
And gels are expensive, and we all know this. Right? Gels are expensive, drinks mixes are expensive. They're all expensive. But at the end of the day, you're just looking to get in the right amount of carbs and the right mix of carbs. So in your race fuel, take a look at the label. It's going to say it's a 1 to 0.8 glucose to fructose, or it's a 1 to 1. If that's what you're going to race with, then you can use anything that matches those numbers in training. And then come race day, you can be specific and you can go with that branded product that you want to use. But if you're going to do that, then also make sure that in your key workouts, you're testing that you have no stomach issues with your preferred product. Okay, so heat raises your core temperature, and that reduces gut tolerance because blood is being moved away from your stomach and processing foods and moved to your skin to cool you down, to your brain, to your muscles.
And that's why measuring core with devices like Core can help you train right up to your safe edge.
And we spoke about Core last week and how we would use it. And in this case for fueling, we're able to, much like Tom did for his heart rate, we're able to take a look at what core temperatures are doing and how that influences your ability to take on liquid, gels, and solids as your core temperature changes. So let's take a look at run-specific tactics.
You had the bouncing problem.
Yeah, running isn't cycling, we're bouncing. Drink and eat at the bottom of your climbs or in aid stations, not just before you start a long downhill. If you run with that bouncing in your stomach, you know what that feels like.
So solids fit best at low bounce sections. So save your fluids and your gels for those technical terrains.
So how do we establish our own personal ceiling? We spoke about this earlier.
Okay, so caffeine is proven. Start with 200 milligram, then smaller doses, and finish with another 200 milligrams.
When it comes to other tools, like you can use bicarbs, you can use nitrates, even ketones, make sure that you're testing those and you are sure that they don't give you gut issues at different intensities and different temperatures. In the slide we're looking at now, this is an adaptation for working on your gut tolerance to high carb intake. So start out, if you can get to 80 grams comfortably for 3 or 4 hours, then ramp it up to 90 to 100. And if you can get to 100, then go 100 to 110, but just do it steadily.
So it's not about the numbers on the slide. It's about what your gut can handle, trained over months.
So let's put it all together. Map your race, assign carb targets per segment, pack your race vest or your little bags that you're going to be using from aid stations accordingly.
And switch your formats as needed. Gels, chews, bottles. Plan liquid-only windows for cold nights.
Let's take a look at what not to do. So don't go and copy the 120 grams an hour at all costs.
Don't leave gut training to the last month either.
And don't rely on aid stations for solids, and don't overdo your electrolytes. And that brings us to our Q&A section. Do we have any questions?
Crickets.
Yeah, just dead quiet.
Yep.
Nobody's got questions. We're always so good at this that we'd never get the questions.
I know, we obviously covered absolutely everything that anybody has ever wondered about.
Nailed it.
But if there are questions, and for any reason you can't think of them right now because you're on the spot, drop us a message and we're happy to add that into our next podcast.
Yeah. Okay, guys, as always, we're going to then leave you with what are our next steps. If you want to get this nailed, you want to get this dialed in, the nutrition, which is unique to you. And we spoke about Tom Evans being tested and getting his substrate utilization sorted out. Do an inside test. We can give you an inside test. There's no poking of needles. There's no sticking stuff in yourself. If you do an inside test, we can tell you what your carb burns are at various heart rates and at various paces, so you can plan and work with the nutritionist to really get your race nutrition properly dialed in for you. Plan the segments that you're going to be pushing on, the segments that you're going to be relaxing on, and understand what carbs should be in your pack and ready for you at those points. Our next episode is going to be a hydration deep dive. That's all from me.
Yeah, that's it. Thanks so much for joining.
See you next time. Definitely no questions, guys. I'm going to leave this for 30 seconds and then we're going to bail.
I got nothing on my side.
Yeah. Not a word.
Nope. Okay.
Okay, we're out.
Yep.
Thanks so much. See you next time.